Well, hello. This is Topher coming to you from Griffith. If my internet looks a little bit worse than normal, it's because it is. I'm in the country town of Griffith, inland New South Wales. I'm in the very first couple of days of my break. I'm not calling it a holiday. We're going traveling because both my wife and I are working while we travel. But I've spent this evening having just some wonderful company from some wonderful locals here in Griffith, and had to drive home madly and get set up as quickly as possible. So if I look a little bit sweaty, it's because I am. It's a warm night. It's a little bit muggy. And I've just been hauling gear and trying to get set up. And look, I try to give you guys a pretty shot normally, but I've got an air conditioner behind me today, and you're just going to have to live with it. Now, my guest tonight, I am ridiculously excited about this. We teed this up a couple of weeks ago. I've had this in mind for months. And this is the beginning of the Plan B series. Anyone that's signed up to my email, and if you haven't, then you need to go to topherfield.net and join the email list there. You'll know that you get an email back to you saying, hey, tell me what I can help you with. What can I talk to you about? What can I help you, educate you with? And I give a couple of suggestions, but it's an open question. You can give any answer you want. The number one answer that I get in response is Plan B. Help me to understand Plan B. This is the beginning of a series on Plan B. Plan B for me has 5 key parts. I'm not going to go through them right now. That's a video for another time where I'll break down Plan B, the 5 pillars of Plan B as I see it, in my opinion. But we're going to get stuck right in. Before we've even gone over the basics of what's going on, I have an amazing guest, and he is going to be sharing with us his wisdom, and it is genuine wisdom in his case, on the digital Plan B. And what I mean by that is the ability to communicate even if maybe the powers that be don't want you to. The ability to transact business, to receive and to make payments, even if, let's say, for example, you lived in Canada and you wanted to send some money to a local truck driving friend of yours, right? There are the powers that be would like to exercise power over our lives in ways that have never been seen before. And we actually have the means to be able to maintain a lot of control and a lot of power and a lot of options, choices. And that's what Plan B is all about. When I talk about it, when I'm talking about Plan B, I'm talking about having options. And my guest tonight is going to be all about that. Now, before we get to that, I know you're all going to ask, not all, some of you hate this, but some of you ask me every single show, what am I smoking? I'm smoking a Cohiba. This is not a Cuban Cohiba. This is a Cohiba for the American market. You can't see the label very well. Again, that's my internet being a bit rubbish, but I'll be enjoying that tonight. It is a Cohiba, Connecticut. And being in Griffith, I actually just today visited, I'll try and get an angle on that where you can read it, the Ashling, spelt Aisling, but it's actually Gaelic. So Ashling, yeah, you can't see a thing. Right, my camera's doing really well. My internet's doing really well. This is called the Boilermaker Tawny Cask single malt whiskey. So I'm going to be enjoying that tonight. So with all the formalities out of the way, and with 250 people watching already, welcome, and thank you for all of the comments. I don't have my usual setup, so I can't be grabbing comments and putting them on the screen quite as much as I usually do, but I will try and do a little bit of it tonight anyway, just not as much as normal. But without any further ado, let me bring on my incredible guest, Stephan Livera, a man who has his own podcast, his own following, a man who could be doing anything with his time right now, but he has chosen to very kindly give his time to us. So would you please welcome Stephan Livera? How are you?
Thanks, Topher, for inviting me, and I'm a fan of your work. Love what you're doing in terms of educating and advocating for liberty. So, of course, happy to join.
Look, I really appreciate it. Now, I've been aware of your existence for quite some time. We do kind of move, broadly speaking, in similar-ish circles, even though you are halfway around the planet from me right now. But I actually really came to realize how lucky I was to know you when I made the decision that I needed to learn a little bit more about crypto and Bitcoin and that sort of stuff, because it's not an area that interests me that much. It's not an area that I naturally gravitate to. It's kind of this thing that I look at, it's over there. Oh yeah, that's a new shiny thing. I'll let some other people go and play with that, right? That's not really that interesting to me. But I realized I needed to learn about it. I needed to knuckle down and actually try and wrap my brain around what this thing was, because whether you're a believer in any one specific cryptocurrency or what have you, the blockchain as a technology, as a concept, is going to be with us for the rest of our lives and is going to change things in ways that I don't think the average person appreciates. But one of the main requests that I've had as I've announced this session, as I've announced this Plan B special on the digital Plan B, is people asking me to start from the very, very basics, to not dive in assuming that people know too much. Now, on the one hand, that's great. On the other hand, we need to cover some ground. So there's going to be a bit of a tension in this session, I think, where we're trying to cover ground quickly but at the same time, start from a place where anyone that's not really up to speed can get up to speed. The first thing I want to talk about is the communications side of things. And how do you communicate and stay in touch with people in a world where maybe there might be some powers that be that don't want you to be able to do that? So can we tap into your knowledge first and foremost on this issue of a VPN and what it is, how it works, and why it matters in today's world?
Right. So a VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. Now, you might have seen VPNs even in the case of your company where you're logging into your corporate VPN, and that's like in the corporate context.
Or an
Now,
intranet
obviously,
kind, they might call it.
exactly. And now the sense in which we're talking about it today is more in the sense of what can we do in terms of giving ourselves a little bit more potentially privacy or potentially access to things that are not typically accessible in the area that you are currently in. And so there are different VPNs out there, but the basic principle is that you are using somebody else's server as a proxy such that you are not necessarily doxing that you are accessing this particular website or this particular online service. Now,
let me give a legit use case for that, because some people assume that this is automatically underhanded. You do this if you're a drug dealer or doing something bad. No. When I traveled in China, I needed to use a VPN. Why? Because Chinese IP addresses, if you're using a device inside China, there's a heap of stuff that you cannot access. Their digital sort of iron curtain will stop you from getting there. So I would use a VPN that then pretended that I was somewhere other than China. It told the internet at large that I was in the UK or in Australia or in the US. And all of a sudden, all of those websites worked for me again. Now, believe it or not, there are huge parts of the internet that are not accessible to you. You may not have been told that before, but there's huge parts of the internet that you don't know exist. And a VPN can be one of the ways to help you get there, along with some other stuff that we'll get to. So let's not start with the assumption that this is all for underhanded stuff. This is actually above board. It's legit. It has a genuine purpose in our lives. Stephan.
Yeah, sure. And actually, it's probably a good point while we're here to make that point that you should not assume that just by using a VPN, you are private from the government, because advanced actors are able to basically still figure out what you're doing. VPNs
100%.
could probably be best understood as a way of helping stop corporate surveillance, and even rather than, let's say, a very serious level actor who's trying to understand what you're doing. So now with VPNs, there are different ways you can use them. So, for example, you can install a VPN app on your computer. You can install a VPN app on your phone and toggle it off and on. And there are also ways to install a VPN, let's say, at the router level. So let's say you are using a particular router. There are ways to install a VPN at that level.
Let's assume that people who know how to do that don't really need our help. Let's stick with the on-the-device level for now.
Gotcha. Yeah, of course. And so essentially how these VPNs work is that you can toggle it on and off, and your internet will then look as though it's coming from this other country, as an example, or from this other server, rather than from your particular server.
Yeah.
Now, there are a few interesting and important considerations. Now, you might want to look at the track record of that VPN, because over the time, things have changed and it's moving, because it's a competitive landscape. And what you ideally want is a VPN that does not have logs. Now, of course, VPNs will say, look, we don't log, etc., but there will be occasionally times where there's a lawsuit against them, and then they have been able to give up something. So in some cases, you might need to try to figure out what are some of the more reliable ones, what are some of the ones that maybe are working a little bit better, or you might also be looking from a performance point of view, because in some cases, VPN from this country or server might be slower than some other one. And so there is a trade-off when you're using these things, but it depends on how you do it, and essentially it can help you avoid some level of corporate surveillance, and in some cases, as you said, get around a firewall.
Let's cut to the chase, because I know a lot of people that follow me, they understand that this stuff's important, but they are in the world of what's called rational ignorance, where this stuff is important, but they're busy with other things. They've got a whole life going on. They don't want to have to sit here and really wrap their brains around this. Is there a VPN that you would confidently recommend for people at the moment?
So there are a few that I like. So one I like is called Mulvad. So that's MULLVAD.net. And that one is interesting to me because here's the cool part. You don't even have to have, so, you don't even have to use a credit card to sign up. You can actually pay with Bitcoin for that one, and you don't even have right. And so the other cool part with this one, now again, I have no relationship with this. It's just something that a bunch of Bitcoin people are using, and so I've used it. I have a couple of different ones that I subscribe to, and sometimes I'll use different ones. But Molvad is a useful one, interestingly, because you don't have to have an account name and a password, and it's not like you don't even have to have an email. So that's so interesting, right? So the idea, yeah. So I'll explain how that works, right? Because most people are used to.
I'm going to do some weird stuff because I'm trying to figure out why my camera. This is not my normal setup. I'm on the road. My camera is doing some really weird stuff. So I'm going to do some weird things to try and get it to look like that instead of like that. Is that really dark for you?
Yeah, it's gone dark. Yeah.
I don't know.
Not sure why that is.
Please keep talking. I can hear you. I'm just going to try and fix that problem as you talk.
Yeah, sure. So, as I was saying, one interesting thing I like about Molvad is that the account setup is a little bit different. So you don't actually have to have an email and a password like you normally would. So in that example, you can create an account, and your account will actually just be a set of numbers. And so you can then log into this using just that set of numbers. So you could have set up an account and then paid for, say, 6 months worth of VPN service, and you would just copy this number into, let's say, your password manager. So, for example, you might be using a password manager to manage your passwords, and you would copy that number that way. And so then you could basically operate using that VPN, and even if the records were to be given up, it wouldn't necessarily be tied back to at least your email or your name, because you never gave them your email or your name.
There's another layer. There's another layer of security for you there.
Yeah. So, and as I was saying, like you generally, the idea is there's this approach called defense in depth. So you might try to put multiple layers of controls or protections there. So this is something that comes up even in the Bitcoin security world, that you might try to put multiple layers of control. So this is another example where you could choose to sign up with a VPN where you never even gave your email or your name. And as an example, if let's say that 6 months has finished that you purchased, the initial 6 months, you could then sign up and have another whole number and like rotate that user number. And so this is just an example of the kinds of things you do that might help you against, say, corporate service or getting around a firewall. It's not, you're not going to be James Bond on this, but you're going to be able to, you can at least give yourself some level of privacy.
All right.
Against.
I want to set some ground rules here for those that are a bit new to this space. The idea that you can be completely anonymous online, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this stuff, mate, because you do know better than I do. The idea that you can ever be completely anonymous online is basically a myth. It's just a question of the amount of resources that someone else is willing to spend trying to figure out who you are. And for most of us, they're not going to spend a lot of resources figuring out who we are. But if you're, a hacker, if you're WikiLeaks, if you're Julian Assange, well, yeah, they're gonna spend whatever it takes resources wise to try and track you down and find you. And really, there is no way to be 100% anonymous online. That's a bit of a myth. What you can do is make it a bit harder for people to connect the online activity with the human being behind it. Now, there are illegitimate reasons why you might want to do that. You might be a drug dealer, but there are also these days legitimate reasons why you might want to do that. You might be someone like me who wants to encourage people to exercise their human right to protest and live in a state where that's been turned into a crime. There are perfectly legitimate reasons why you might want to make it harder for the government to connect your online activity with who you are as a human being. So a VPN, and I'm going to say this, and then you can refine this, nuance this, correct me as and if I'm wrong. It allows you to access the internet without your local internet provider being able to see what you're accessing, and without them being able to stop you from accessing anything specific, because I don't know what it is, right? From their point of view, they can't see what it is that you're accessing, so you get free reign there. In addition, it means that the person at the other end, where the person that you're actually interacting with, doesn't know who they're interacting with. So the people online that know who you are, like your ISP, don't know what you're looking at. And the people who know what you're looking at don't know who you are. Is that a fair enough kind of summation of what a VPN does?
Mostly right, but there's a few small pieces. Now, even I don't consider myself some computer security expert, but this is just what I've learned just from years being in the Bitcoin world and with Bitcoin people about Bitcoin security. But as an example, if you were using a VPN, but you still logged in, as an example, on your Facebook account. Or if you
Yes,
had
of course.
a cookie,
Of
there
course.
are still ways that you can still be
Yeah.
de-anonymized based on things. So another example would be browser fingerprinting. So basically, there are ways where people who track you online will find ways of using things like a tracking pixel, or they will use things like, based on certain settings in your browser, they can fingerprint and then try to de-anonymize you in certain ways. So it gets really complicated really quickly. But I think, to the point you were saying, it does come down to what level of resources that person is looking to. If it's an individual or an organization that's going after you, like, theoretically, there's different levels to this. So as an example, if you were using a VPN, that might help you against, at least it might help you against just like randoms online, that, you know, and maybe like some private investigator sort of person. But let's say once you start getting to more advanced or resourced adversaries, well, then it becomes more and more difficult or impossible to really stop. But the idea is, you might as well get the lowest hanging fruit. You might as well stop that. You don't want to be the lowest hanging fruit, because they're the ones who can more easily go after you. Like, they're the ones who will be going after first.
There's a second purpose here. There's the anonymizing yourself and making yourself harder for people to figure out who you are. But there's also just the access issue, the Chinese example that I gave a moment ago, where without a VPN, you simply can't access certain things. And believe it or not, without the Tor, which we'll talk about in a second, I don't want to go super deep into that, but without Tor, this whole, like, I don't know if it's half the internet or whatever, but there's a huge chunk of the internet that you can't access, that most internet users don't even know exists. And even people like myself, where I do know that it exists, I've barely scratched the surface of it. And I'm frankly, and full disclosure, I'm a little bit apprehensive about the whole thing. That whole world is a little bit weird and unfamiliar, because the internet to me is this really familiar place. You just open up Google and you type in what you want, and there it is. It shows up in front of you. And if you really have to, if you're having a bad day, you might have to go to the second page of Google. The idea of wading into sort of the back alley of the internet is really quite scary for a lot of people, myself included. So we'll get to Tor and all of that in just a second. But before we wind up on VPN, I want to make this super simple for anyone that just doesn't want to have to really do a lot of thinking or a lot of deep research on this. So I've used ExpressVPN in the past. I've also had another one recommended to me more recently, whose name I don't recall. These are, you pay with a credit card. So your identity is already compromised in that sense. But just from the perspective of, yes, absolutely, making yourself less visible against low-hanging fruit, easy attacks, but also then accessing things like a Tor browser, etc., which we'll get to in just a second. You still need to have a VPN in order to do those things. Talk us through, what's the 2-minute version? Because a lot of people think it's hard. It's actually very easy. What's the 2-minute version of how someone who just knows how to use their phone, but that's about it, how do they get onto a VPN?
Sure. So the 2-minute version is, you go to the website, purchase a VPN subscription, and you install the app, and then it will normally have a toggle, and you just press that and toggle it on, and done. I mean, that's the 2-minute version. Now, of course, you want to try to purchase it without tying it to your ID. So that's where, so let's say a Bitcoin one like Molvad, as an example, would be useful. But, we're talking about the 2-minute version.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And for most people, they're not yet ready to be paying with Bitcoin and so forth. Like, for the purposes of the digital plan B, they're not there yet. By the time we're finished tonight, they might be ready to start moving in that direction and starting to get a bit more sophisticated. I actually got tripped up the first time I used a VPN, which was in preparation for a trip to China. I knew that I was going to have to be able to access my emails, which is Google, and also Facebook. And if I didn't have a VPN, I was not going to be able to access those things while I was in China. I actually got tripped up by how easy it was, because I felt like it mustn't have been working. I felt like I must have made a mistake somewhere. So I went to ExpressVPN. I'm not endorsing them. I don't get anything out of them. That's just the one that I used. And that was years ago. There could very well be a better one now. Honestly, Google is actually kind of your friend on this stuff. Just Google, the 5 best VPNs in 2022 and read a couple of articles. And people usually do a pretty good job of explaining why the different ones are good or bad at different things, right? So you go to their website, you say you want to sign up, you pay the money, your monthly subscription in the case of ExpressVPN, you download their piece of software, and you're spot on. You just click a button. And that's what threw me. I was like, I don't have to set any settings in. I don't need to be like configuring ports or doing, like, there was nothing at all. And which made me just sit there and go, why hasn't everyone already done this? Like, I hadn't done it for years and years and years. They've been around for a long time, and I hadn't used them. But they're so incredibly easy.
So yeah, if you, I guess the reason why in some cases it's connectivity, it can cause issues around logging into websites. Sometimes you're more likely to get the
Sometimes.
captcha if you're doing on a VPN.
Yep.
It could also be a battery drain on your phone. So let's say you've got it on all day on your phone. These are trade-offs, right? There ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And so that's now a couple other interesting considerations, I guess, just before we move on. Listeners might be advised that if you're going into a area or a country that is known for blocking these kinds of things, you might want to install the VPN and connect on it while you're still in the comparatively free country or area, because sometimes in certain countries they will block VPN usage. And if
you won't be able to download the app or whatever,
if you had downloaded it outside that jurisdiction and then you were visiting in that jurisdiction, well, then now you can just enable it. And you might have some more issues around which server do you connect through, or trying to, it might be a little bit more finicky in that kind of jurisdiction. But again, it is already a more adversarial, tough environment. So it's just another tool that you could employ along with Tor, which I'm sure we're going to get to.
Yeah, well, that describes exactly my experience with China. I was warned, have a VPN set up before you go, so I did exactly that. I then, just for fun, went on to the App Store in China, and there was a lot of stuff missing. There was a lot of stuff that just wasn't there because it's been geo-blocked. And so, yes, if I hadn't been set up before I went into China, there was no way I was going to be able to get set up, at least no way at my very low level of technical ability that I was going to be able to get set up while I was in China. So I was very, very glad that I was set up already. Now, I do just, I've got a few comments coming through, actually a lot of comments, but I can't bring them all up. As I said before, I don't have my normal setup. Louise, listen, if you're going to troll, at least put some effort in, please. So is this the new story? Couldn't sell your doco, so now you're trying to flog internet security. Ha 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 ha. Listen, I didn't sell the doco. It was crowdfunded. I'm not trying to raise any money out of it at all. And it's been watched by nearly 500,000 people. Thank you very much. And also, I'm not trying to sell anything. I have nothing to sell in internet security, and neither is Stephan. Okay, I mean, he does have his relationships with certain companies. I will let him flog that towards the end, but no one's making money out of this. Stephan is giving us his time. Please, I love my trolls. You create lots of internet activity, lots of comments. You feed the algorithm, but please try harder. Do a better job. Show some self-respect in your trolling. Okay. So that's a VPN. Now, virtual private network, it helps to add some layer of anonymity to what you're doing online and to who you're doing it with. It's not the be all and end all, like we said, but nothing really is. However, it is your ticket. Without a VPN, correct me if I'm wrong, without a VPN, you can't get into the onion router world. Is that correct?
You actually, I mean, if you just installed Tor browser straight on your computer, you can just use Tor without VPN. Yeah, I mean it. And actually, I've seen different arguments on this, but I think one argument is actually that you shouldn't be using a VPN and Tor at the same time. It's one or the other.
Really?
So, because it could be that the use of both together could help somebody de-anonymize you.
Interesting. Okay, that's an angle I hadn't thought about before. Okay, so let's take another big step back. We've gone a little bit into VPNs. VPNs are easy and fast. We've already kind of covered it. Do a search, find someone that's listed the top 5, pick the one that sounds right for you, buy it, install it, click the button, bang. You're done. It's genuinely that easy. Okay, you're done. Tor, there's a bit more going on here. And I genuinely don't know a lot about it. So my questions are not going to be me being condescending and talking down to my audience. I'm actually that dumb when it comes to Tor stuff. So you just mentioned the word a Tor browser. What is that?
So the Tor browser is actually it's a piece of software released by the Tor project. So rewinding, just for any listeners who are new.
Let's take another step back.
The Tor stands for the Onion Router. Now, the irony is that Tor was actually a US government project. So you might think, oh, what? Like, you want to use this US government project? But it turned out that they actually wanted this as a network to operate, even so that their own operatives could be in some other country operating under adversarial conditions. So it's kind of a weird relationship there that, you might have to be in certain cases. Your VPN might not work, and you might actually need to use Tor.
Right.
So there's so similar to like we were saying with VPNs, you can use Tor as the Tor browser on your computer. If you are more technically advanced, so we're not going to get into that, but you can run Tor as a service, which is basically like running in the background on your computer. And then you can also run Tor on your phone. So there's a Tor browser, or there's an app called Orbot, ORBOT. And so I believe Orbot is like the default one. So basically the default one is the Tor browser for your laptop or your PC. And then for your phone, I think it's ORBOT, Orbot. And I think you can also get another, I think there is like a Tor browser for your phone, basically. So those are a few examples. And basically what Tor does is it will route, and it's called the onion router. So if you think like those babushka dolls, it kind of, the idea is that I believe
Layers.
it's 3 hops. Yeah, right. And so the idea is that your traffic is now routed through these hops. And so each one is unveiling a layer so that you only know one layer, one step in front or behind. And so it's done in a way to obviously give yourself some more anonymity. That said, so Tor is probably going to be, it's one of those things where it's not perfect, but it's kind of like people have love-hate relationships with Tor, but at the same time, it is one of the well-known tools to be able to access, let's say, the dark web, as you mentioned, all these websites that are not accessible on the normal internet that you actually need to go via a Tor browser or a Tor service to access.
Okay, so if you get a Tor browser, which again, you can Google it and you can find a Tor browser and you can find it in your app store and you can literally download it. It's not some evil thing that you have to go and do. You don't have to go and do a drug deal in a back alley to get a hold of this stuff, right? You install a Tor browser. What is on the dark web, Stephan? I've read an article about someone that just said it was kiddie porn and drugs, and that's all that's there, right? Obviously, that's not true. So what's actually there, and why would a law-abiding, peace-loving person want to have access to the dark web?
So I'll be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time on the dark web myself. I have occasionally gone just to kind of read some of the forums and things, just to see what people are saying. And that's more looking at from a Bitcoin privacy perspective. Sometimes see forums and posts and interesting discussion. And so, I can appreciate it from that point of view. You might, and look, the other aspect is there may be people who have no nefarious intent, but they are, let's say, some kind of freedom or activist in a country where they ban certain things,
in oppressive regimes like Victoria. Your answer actually contained the answer. You might go there looking for certain information. The information that you can find in the dark web is much broader, let's just say. Now, that doesn't mean all of it's accurate, of course. Buyer beware, use your discretion. There are plenty of bad actors on the dark web, people who are very happy to suck you in. But at the same time, there is a lot of information there and links to authoritative sources and so forth that an intelligent individual that uses their discretion can do a level of research there on any given topic that's probably not possible in the public web. Is there a general term for like the non-dark web? Is there kind of a, like the Google web?
I guess you might say ClearNet. So people,
ClearNet. Yeah,
kind of like a term you hear techie people say, "Oh, are you on Tor or are you on ClearNet?" Just open.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so information. That's the number one reason why I personally want to have access to the so-called dark web. Is not for drug deals and whatever other nonsense. It's because people actually speak freely there. Doesn't mean everyone's right, but people actually speak their minds. So let's sum up so far, because we're blasting through fairly quickly. You've got a meeting in another hour and a half. And I want to make sure we've got plenty of time to talk about crypto. So I'm kind of blasting through VPN fairly quickly. We're blasting through Tor fairly quickly. VPN allows you a layer of protection to your identity and a layer of protection to the information that you're looking at. Tor allows you to get into parts of the internet that you cannot otherwise get into. Those two either used together or separately, an intelligent human being will be able to use to be able to continue to communicate, even if the government is trying to shut them down, shutting down their social media accounts, shutting down their email addresses, these sorts of things. You will be able to create an online presence that allows you to send and receive emails and allows you to engage in a bunch of conversation and read a bunch of good material, whether the government really wants you to or not. That's why you need to know about VPNs. And that's why you need to at least have a passing familiarity with the onion router network. You may not need it right now, but if you at least understand it, then if a day comes when you do need it, you can wade back into it and you've got some confidence and some idea what's going on. So let's park VPN. Let's park Tor. Let's get to the one that, quite frankly, everyone really actually wants to know about, especially in the context of the Canadian situation, where we've got people that have donated $50 to the Canadian truckers that are now finding that that transaction history is causing them to be tracked down by the Canadian government. In some cases, their bank accounts to be actually taken off them and suspended by the Canadian government. and that all of a sudden we're now being tracked and targeted on the basis of our financial activity and debanked. Our banking, our ability, our license to bank is being revoked by governments, by Western governments in the free world. Now, crypto obviously offers a solution to that, but if we dive right into that, we're going to be diving in too deep for some people. So I want to take a massive step all the way back, like we did for VPN, like we did for Tor. I've got some people who are concerned about crypto being the mark of the beast. I had one particularly amusing comment from someone saying that it has the word crypt in it, which refers to death, and therefore it's of the devil, and I don't want to have a bar of it. Okay, good for you, mate. I'm not going to try and change your mind. That's a decision you're free to make. Let's dispel some of this nonsense. What actually is a cryptocurrency? And why do we call it a cryptocurrency rather than just another currency?
So I take it as a Bitcoin only point of view, but yeah, certainly I guess cryptocurrency.
Sure, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But yeah,
and we'll get into all of that, I'm sure. The short answer, I mean, I don't particularly like the way it's gone that way, but because crypto used to mean cryptography. But now what's happened is there's been almost a shifting in the mindset. So they think of, crypto is cryptocurrency. And I think a lot of crypto is actually, as in cryptocurrency, is just a lot of scams or grifting, basically. That's crypto. Now, I view Bitcoin as something different. Bitcoin is a project. It's an open source project to create digital money that is outside the control of any government, any company, any individual. There is no CEO, there's no head office of Bitcoin, there's no marketing department of Bitcoin. There are volunteers. There are volunteers who write Bitcoin protocol code. There are volunteers and entrepreneurs who are building Bitcoin services, Bitcoin wallets, Bitcoin applications. There are Bitcoin podcasters like me who put information out there to try to, I basically do a lot of interviews about Bitcoin. So for anyone interested in Bitcoin, obviously you just got to go in your podcast app, search Stephan Livera podcast, and you can see a lot of my stuff there. But basically, there's
can I just say, highly recommended. I give the Stephan Livera podcast my personal recommendation for anyone that wants to learn more about especially Bitcoin. Stephan is very much a Bitcoin loyalist. And I've got to say, a fairly convincing one, because I've gone from being, I have no idea, to now being, I have some idea, and I now understand why Bitcoin loyalists exist. Well, I'm not sure if I agree yet. I'm still learning, but I understand what the logic is, which is a big step forward for me.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Topher. I think Bitcoin is going to change all of our lives more than all of us can even understand.
Yeah.
So the reason for that is that it represents this open system that anybody can join. Anybody can spin up a wallet and take payment in Bitcoin. Anybody can spin up a wallet, and once they've purchased some Bitcoin, they can now send that Bitcoin to whatever cause they believe in, whether that's the truckers, whether that's BLM or whatever else. Because the important point to be made here is, and I understand, obviously, our audience today is probably more sympathetic to the truckers, obviously, more sympathetic to the truckers than to say BLM, as an example.
But the technology is agnostic.
Exactly. That's exactly. It's neutral. It's a neutral tool. Bitcoin is neutral in that sense, but in another sense, it's very political because it's taking the power of money away from the state, or it's taking that exclusive power of money away from the state, because it allows people to basically transact under adversarial conditions where they can still transact and not be shut down. And potentially, if they use the right techniques, they can do that in a more private way. So I think it just comes back to that understanding that Bitcoin is an open source project, and it comes back to this idea of what makes the most saleable money, right? Why would you choose money? You choose the one that's most marketable. So I consider myself a student of the Austrian School of Economics, and if we go back and read, Carl Menger in the 1870s was writing about this idea of on the origins of money. How does money arise? Because there are people who have different views about what money is. Some people have this top-down view. The god, the king, the government is the one who, the king or the government who sets the money. And this is like the chartalist view of money. And the Austrians have a different view.
The divine right of kings kind of approach to money.
Exactly, right? And so the Austrians have more of a bottom-up view of money. Money spontaneously emerges on the market. It's emergent based on the decisions and the billions of choices that the billions of people on this earth make. And so we select money based on certain characteristics. Fungible. Is it scarce? Is it durable? Is it divisible? Is it recognizable, etc.?
Mhm.
Is it portable? And how well
Yeah.
can it carry our value through time and space? So a very simple way to simplify it might be that historically the world used gold, which would hold your value over time, but it was not very transportable over space. Now, fiat money is very transportable through space because you can instantly send it around the world. Or, okay, fine, there might be a few days delay for the wire, but it doesn't hold your value over time. Bitcoin can be thought of as being transportable both over time and over space in terms of value.
Right.
So that's where Bitcoin really is different. It's setting up, we're setting up this era of the Bitcoin standard. So I believe we're moving towards a world where Bitcoin and a fraction of Bitcoin, a Satoshi, is how we will denominate things. You might buy a coffee for 200 sats or Satoshis or whatever it is.
Yeah. All right. So we've dived in at a level that I know for your typical podcast audience, because they're coming to you because they already know something about this and they want to learn more, might be fine. But I'm just aware I've got a really broad cross section of people watching this, including people that have almost avoided the subject up until now. So I want to take a little bit of a step back to really understand the significance of what Bitcoin is. We need to talk for a second about what fiat money is and government issued money actually is. You can't understand the contrast until you understand what government money actually is in the first place. So when we use, let's say, Australian dollars here in Australia, we are using a currency that is issued by the government, controlled by the government, interest rates, etc., the availability of credit, how much money there is in supply, etc., is all controlled by the government. Then it is also then being devalued by the government on an ongoing basis through continued money printing, through their inflation targets. They actually give themselves a target to devalue money by a certain amount every single year. Typically between 1.5% and 2.5% is typically where their target sits. I think in reality, we've actually seen it closer to 7.5% to 10% for the last 10 years, and we could very well be in excess of 12% right now. That's just my opinion. But the actual official inflation figures are very, very heavily fiddled with. The point of it is, though, just to reinforce what Stephan said, it is top down. This is a government currency, completely controlled and issued by the government. If for you to have a bank account, you have to go to an institution that has a license with the government. Even just to be able to transact in cash, obviously, you can just do that person to person. But the minute you want to engage in the system with a bank account, you actually have to go through an institution that has a government license to be allowed to do that in the first place. It is completely controlled from the top down. The thing that did my head in with Bitcoin for a long time, and I had to just kind of get over in the end because I just had to accept that it was true, even though it just seemed so impossible, is that you don't need anyone's permission to have an account. You just create one. And it did. How can this be possible? How can you have an account unless some central body has said, oh, yes, we recognize that account. Yes, okay, you've got, like, how is this even possible? Furthermore, how can you have a currency that is not coming from a central planned authority that is issuing more of it? How can it come from the actions of individuals and the mining process, which we probably shouldn't go into? But ultimately, like you said, it's coming from the ground up. It gets even weirder, though, because you said before, people are writing code for Bitcoin. Well, that sounds dangerous to me. What if one person writes some bad code? Well, the answer is this. Everyone who participates in Bitcoin actually ends up kind of voting on which things to adopt and which things not. And again, if I get anything wrong, please correct me. So even the way that Bitcoin functions is a matter of a democratic process from the bottom up. It could not be more of a reversal. But what I'd love for you to do, now that we've kind of established what the difference is, one's top down, one is genuinely bottom up. Can you talk to me about scarcity? Because the very first of your podcasts that I listened to, which was the one that you recommend I start with, you gave this really good discussion around what makes Bitcoin different to a lot of the other cryptocurrencies as well. But essentially, this Austrian argument of scarcity and utility. And I found that really, really convincing myself. That was a really eye-opening discussion. So would you be able to give us, like, I don't know, a 10-minute, 15-minute, however long it takes, version of that discussion?
Yeah, sure. So the short answer, I think it comes back to what Carl Menger was saying back in the 1870s. Why do we select money? Because it is the most saleable. And we can think of it like there's all these different potential monies out there, but they're competing against each other because the more you hold of one is the less you can hold of another. Now, it's very different to, let's say, social media networks, right? We can have a Facebook account and a Twitter account and a LinkedIn account, and it won't cost us that much more to have those. But if you hold $1, that's less Australian dollars you can hold. If you hold Bitcoin, that's less fiat you can hold. So it really forces an opportunity cost on all of us. And so it behooves all of us to select the best possible monetary candidate. So we want to look for the thing that has the best monetary qualities. And as obviously, as you were just saying, one of the most important ones is scarcity. Now we can this using the stock to flow metric. Now that's like my friend Safedine Amoose writes in his book, The Bitcoin Standard. And so I've interviewed Safedine many times. He's a friend of mine. But the basic gist of this argument is that over time in history, there were just times where there was a tendency towards the most scarce money. Now, of course, it's not just scarcity; it's a bunch of other things too. But there were examples, as he goes through in his book, The Bitcoin Standard, where there was this island called Yap, and there were these rice stones in the community, and they were the stones and the ways that you would track ownership or kind of like favor, like a ledger of who's done what. And so when you did something for somebody, they would transfer that, ownership of that. And the people collectively had that ledger. So you can think of Bitcoin as like this decentralized ledger around the world where you can transfer your fraction of a rock or a Bitcoin, fraction of a Bitcoin, Satoshis. And the interesting thing as well is there's his funny and interesting history around it, because settlers can turn up and they find, oh, hey, we've got dynamite, we've got explosive technology. We'll just go around to the other side of the island, blow up some rocks, and now we'll just take your wealth at pennies on the dollar. And and so at that point, it's like, oh, wait a minute, this was all this work that I'd put in to build my wealth, and now this guy just came along and did it. And another real example is in Africa, where there were glass beads, and so glass beads were used as money hundreds of years ago, and basically the Europeans turn up and they've got glass blowing technology, and they're like, hey, these guys are using beads as their money, but we can just like go make that and then bring it here and then again buy their wealth at pennies on the dollar. And they were literally,
the story goes that they basically went back, loaded up galleons full of glass beads, went back and basically just bought these guys out because they had something that was next to worthless, glass offcuts, basically glass beads. But it was used as money. And so it comes down to the replicability of money. The more replicable a money item is, the less valuable it's going to be over the long term, because people are going to replicate it. They want the purchasing power. Unfortunately, a government-controlled currency, and someone said, oh, but it's not government-controlled, it's a private reserve bank. Okay, fine, but it's still centrally controlled. There is a central body that is in control of the issuing of all of this currency. And if that's the case, they can replicate it as much as they want. Your money is infinitely replicable. It came out of nowhere and they can make more of it out of nowhere. If you're using glass beads, someone with glass blowing technology can replicate it far more cheaply than what you can. Why is Bitcoin different to that? Why? I mean, it's just some code. Can't code be replicated infinite? Couldn't I just like Control C, Control V, Control C, Control V? What is it about Bitcoin that means I can't replicate it?
Yeah, and it's a great question. And so the thing, as most people are used to, like you work every day to, work hard to earn your money, and then they can just print more of it. The difference with Bitcoin is the use of cryptography, use of this network, the growth of the network in terms of the businesses that support it, the miners that secure the network, the developers that work on it, the education, the users. It's not so easy to copy paste Bitcoin. Like, yes, you could copy paste the code, and probably over 10,000 altcoins have tried this, but none of them have beaten Bitcoin in terms of overall market cap. And so it's not that people haven't been trying, they have. It's just they haven't succeeded. And the reason for that, I think it all comes back to those monetary qualities, right? Because if you could try to invent, Topher coin, or I could try to put out Stephan coin, but no one else would use it. Why would they want to use?
I would totally invest in Stephan coins. I would be numero uno customer. I'd be right there.
That's right. But the think of it this: in a world where you can simply use the best money, why would you ever choose the second best? Because you know that there's a bigger market out there for people who want Bitcoin than people who want number 2, 3, 4, and 5 coins. And so it just tends towards one. And so Mises wrote in his book, The Theory of Money and Credit, I believe in like early 1900s, he wrote that he wrote a section there saying there would one by one be a tendency towards the most marketable. And so one by one, the less marketable commodities will be rejected, in essence, leaving one, money. Like in essence, the most marketable good is money. And so it comes down to this concept of salableness or marketability. And so,
can I pick up on that and say that we actually see this in the real world? For example, what happened to the Zimbabwe dollar, right? People decided that they didn't want the Zimbabwe dollar. They would rather have basically anything else. And so they were happy to trade the Zimbabwe dollar for basically anything else at rapidly declining exchange rates. And ultimately, the Zimbabwe dollar ceased to exist. I saw it with my own eyes when I was in Venezuela with the Venezuelan bolivar. It ended up ceasing to exist. They basically said, right, we're ending that one and we're issuing a new currency, right? The worst forms of money are disappearing before our eyes. It happens all the time. But we assume that the best form of money is going to be some other type of fiat currency. If the worst form of money is the Venezuelan bolivar, then the best form of money must be the US dollar or, the Chinese yuan or whichever one it is that you think is going to outlast the others. But actually what we miss is that there's forms of money that aren't fiat currency at all. And that's what you're saying is Bitcoin somehow, due to its nature, is a better form of money than any of the government issued forms of money. Is that correct?
Correct. Bitcoin provides assurances that fiat money could literally never provide, because the very nature of the system, as you rightly pointed out, will be an incentive for somebody. Whoever can print money will. Bitcoin is like this system of saying nobody should be able to print money. It's this schedule and that's it. The altcoins are saying we want to be the ones to print money. They are basically just recreating the fiat world just with themselves at the top. Bitcoin is actually a real step forward, a real big movement forward for humanity. And I really think 50 or 100 years from now, people will look back and think how insane it was that we chose these fiat monies that, let's say, kings and governments could just print at will. And the interesting thing, as you rightly said, with Venezuela and other countries like Zimbabwe, is these were not always basket case nations. They were, at times, rich, quite wealthy nations. And so they had resources, natural resources, and others. And it's the political climate and the constant, debt, government debt, and certain things that just led to this erosion. And then over time, you get this gradually then suddenly effect. And then all of a sudden, anyone who's rich or smart is getting out of the country because they know they can't get food or toilet paper or some other daily life essentials. And so I've done episodes talking about this as well. I did an episode with these two gentlemen, Philip Haslam and Russ Lamberti, and they wrote literally about Zimbabwe, how that happened. And so they talk about these gorge moments and how, for example, there was a lot of credit and there was a lot of people trying to buy things to buy a real asset, because otherwise, if you didn't spend your money, it was like monetary hot potatoes, right? So, and as I'm sure you saw that in Venezuela, right? As soon as people earn that money, they're running to the store to try and buy things because they don't just be left holding the bag.
Because tomorrow the price will be higher. And the day after that, the price will be higher again. If you don't spend it today, you're going to need more of it in order to buy the same amount of stuff. We're used to that on a year-by-year basis. But imagine not 5% per year, or as I think we're experiencing, it's 7.5 to 12.5% per year. Imagine 10% a week. Now, fast forward only a few months later into the Venezuelan experiment, it becomes 10% a day. And think about how people's psychology changes and what they're doing with that money, and how badly they want to get out of that money, which then feeds this dropping value because everyone wants to sell it, no one wants to buy it. So it becomes this death spiral. And I've seen it with my own eyes. I was in Yugoslavia when it was not Yugoslavia. I was in I nearly had it. When I'm gonna yell out the random name of a country that doesn't exist. Yes, Liechtenstein. I was in Liechtenstein in 1989 when their currency was failing. That was my first encounter with it. We were in there for 3 days, and the exchange rate that my parents got on the way in versus on the way out was radically different because their currency was losing value that fast. I've seen it now with my own eyes in Venezuela. And this is a reality that's now facing the US dollar. This is all personal opinion, by the way. This is not financial advice. Disclaimer, right? But in my personal opinion, we are the inflation we're seeing with the US dollar is not transitory. It is structural, and it's going to continue for a very long time and could well get quite a lot worse. And the Australian dollar is going to follow. So if you knew that your money in an Australian bank account was going to halve in value in the next 2 or 3 years, would you look for a better place to put it that maybe isn't going to halve in value in the next 2 or 3 years? Venezuela, and I'll finish on this and then I'll hand back to you because we want to hear your wisdom on this topic. But Venezuela was what actually softened my previous disinterest to crypto and to Bitcoin. Because Venezuela in 2014 had the highest per capita uptake of Bitcoin of anywhere in the world. And it was because they didn't want to be holding those Venezuelan bolivars because they were losing money so fast. But the government was controlling the exchange and how much money you could get out. So unless you had really good government connections, you couldn't buy US dollars. You couldn't buy other currencies with your bolivars. You had to have connections in the government. But what you could do was exchange it out into crypto. And so that's what people were doing. And ultimately, there were businesses, and I met people that ran businesses in Venezuela in 2014 that would not take a client on unless they were going to pay in Bitcoin. And they would not take an employee on unless the employee was happy to be paid in Bitcoin. And their entire life had moved across to Bitcoin. This is 2014 we're talking about here. And that's what really shocked me. I thought, if these are the people that are living it, they are living an economic collapse. And they, in their own self-interest and self-preservation, have turned to Bitcoin. That should tell me something. That should tell me that I should at least pay attention to whatever the hell this thing is and to how to use it. So how does a noob get into Bitcoin without getting burned by scammers and bad actors out there?
So a few things. There are platforms where you can purchase Bitcoin. Obviously, I work at swanbitcoin.com, so that's a place where people can purchase. Now,
Sure.
There are, let's say, is most of your audience Australian, or where are they?
Predominantly, but Canadian, US, etc. as well, but predominantly Australian.
Gotcha. Yeah. So look, there are different platforms that you can purchase Bitcoin. I would go for the Bitcoin only platforms rather than the ones that are going to try to teach you that you should buy into all the cryptos, because I think that ends up pushing people down this pathway of trying to gamble, and they end up trying to trade and then just lose money. Whereas if you go to a platform that encourages you to stack sats, so we say stacking Satoshis, or the idea is it's saving basically. So what you want to do is first buy at least a small amount. And you could even do that peer-to-peer, right? Like, as an example, there are Bitcoin meetups all around the world. I used to be one of the co-hosts or co-organizers of Bitcoin Sydney back when I was in Australia. And you can go to that meetup and you can try to buy some in person from a real Bitcoin person right there. And so as an example, you can have it on your phone. So there are different wallets that you can use. So an easy one, if you're on, let's say if you're interested in privacy, one of my favorites on Android is called Samurai Wallet. And that's the
one I use as well.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, so that's a good one for Android users. For iPhone users, there's different ones out there. One is called Moon Wallet, but it's spelled MUUN.com. So if you go there, or Phoenix is another one, or Blue Wallet is another one. So, I mean, there's a bunch of these different ones, but I would say stick to some of those wallets as an example. Just start with a small amount on your phone and purchase that and start your process of learning, right? Listen to the podcast, read some of the books. And
I agree.
That's part of why I started my podcast.
Listen to the Stephan Livera podcast.
Yeah. Because it's honestly just very confusing out there, because you might not really know the right questions to ask. And so if you listen to me,
charged, confusing as hell.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so there are different podcasts out there and different material, but basically you can go there and learn from that. Another way, as an example, so on Swan Bitcoin, we have this thing called the canon. And so basically it's like little curated sets of resources. So swanbitcoin.com/canon. It's spelled CANON. So swanbitcoin.com/canon. And you can see a list of curated resources. So I have one there. Other people there, like Lynn Alden and others, have privacy ones there, or other ones. And so that's like a way to find a curated pathway into this. Of course, listening to the podcast is one way. So there are a few things there. What I would say is, generally, you want to learn to do what's called taking self-custody. So now, maybe first,
okay, everybody pay attention. This is really freaking important if you do not want to experience what people in Canada are experiencing right now with their cryptocurrency wallets. Please continue.
Exactly. Yes. So in Bitcoin, as Topher was saying, you can set up an account without asking permission. So think of it like this. You can create a Bitcoin wallet on your phone. And so, for example, if you set up a Bitcoin wallet on your phone, they're free. It's just an app, basically. You can generate an address to which you can receive coins. And you can think of it like your wallet is managing the keys for that address. So then when you want to spend out of that, it can do that for you.
I find the wallet terminology confusing. I found it a lot easier once I just said to myself, wallet equals account. I can have a Bitcoin account on my phone. And that suddenly became easier for me.
Right. Yeah. So maybe that's a little easier. Another analogy you can use is like lockboxes and keys. So you can think of it like, let's say, Topher, you generate a Bitcoin address and I pay you into that address.
Yep.
That's like a lockbox that I can put money into, but I cannot take it out because I don't have your private key. You are the one who can spend those coins because you hold the private key. Now, typically with these wallets, they'll ask you to write down 12 words. That back up. Do not lose that. Do not show it to anybody. Don't take a picture of it. Don't put it online. These are some just basic techniques and tips that you can use.
For safekeeping, send me a copy, and that way, if you ever lose yours, you'll be able to come to me and find that I've already taken your money.
Exactly right. So that's one of the dangers in this space is that there are scammers who they'll do things like saying, I'm from the wallet support and tell me your 12 or 24 words and I'll help you. But actually they're scammers.
100%.
So there are scammers in the space. You've just got to keep your wits about you and just not, just do your best to not, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And so don't view Bitcoin like it's a get rich quick. I would say, think of this like you want to stack it for the long term. You think of it as like you're buying it and you're holding it for a minimum of 4 years, probably more like 10 years. Now, that said, if you are under more of an adversarial environment, then yes, you can use it, obviously.
You're going to start using it,
So as an example, I think what would have been better is in that, in the Canadian truckers example, it probably, they could have, I think there were better ways to have gone about that in terms of the Bitcoin aspect of that. I mean, we don't want to get too into the weeds of it, but basically they could have told each of those truckers to basically set up on their phone and just pay them into their phones, and that might have been a bit of an easier way to deal with it rather than trying to publicly tie these things to their identity. Now, there were some Bitcoin individuals who were donating, right, because they wanted to help the truckers. But then what happened is I think people had too much of a mindset of, oh, look, it's transparent. We want it to be, to show we're giving these coins to this person. But then the thing is now that the government can weaponize that they can say, hey, look, you put out a video showing you gave this money to this person. And now there's like an injunction and all this. Whereas it might have been much simpler if, let's say, truckers or like somebody was just saying, look, we're just going to privately donate to these truckers as opposed to trying to make it a whole transparent thing.
Okay, so I want to talk about this whole wallet that is in an exchange, like a non-custodial wallet versus a custodial wallet. You can essentially, you can have Bitcoin with an exchange, and I'll try this again, where I'll try and say what I believe to be true, and then you can correct the things I get wrong.
Sure. Yeah.
You can go to, you can set up a wallet with, let's say, an Australian exchange. Now, the advantage is that you can directly transfer your Australian dollars into Bitcoin or whichever crypto, okay? And the problem is your identity is already compromised because in order for them to set up the account, they have to go through the know your customer requirements, which means they know exactly who you are, which means everyone knows exactly who owns that particular Bitcoin account. There is another way to do it, and that is to download a custodial wallet where you have control of it rather than an exchange. The other downside of an exchange is that they can take it off you. You're not the only person with, and there's different ones work differently, but if it's in an exchange, as a general rule, assume that if the government came along and heavied them and said, you have to take everyone's money and give it to us, they would fold and they would do that. If you have the wallet, either as a cold storage wallet, which might be a little USB stick that sits in your pocket and it's offline except when it's plugged in by you, or as an app on your phone, either of those is okay. An app on your phone may be slightly less secure, but still pretty jolly secure compared to a bank account or anything else. If you have it as your wallet on your phone that is not attached to an exchange, then as long as no one gets your keys, it's yours. No one can take it off you. And we saw an example of that. I don't remember the name of the exchange, but they were an exchange in Canada that were a non-custodial exchange. So they're an exchange, but they don't keep custody of the coins of their customers. And the Canadian government came along and said, right, you've got to give us all this information. You've got to tell us all this stuff. And they literally wrote back to the Canadian courts and said, we don't have that information, you idiots. Go and learn what non-custodial means before you start saying this stupid stuff again. I can't remember the name of what that exchange was.
That example, so there's a few things there. So you might be thinking of Bull Bitcoin as the exchange, or you might be thinking actually in that example, Nunchuk Wallet. Now that is
yes, it was Nunchuk Wallet. Yes,
Nunchuk Wallet. So Nunchuk Wallet is open source software. So that's not even an exchange. But
okay, excuse me, my bad.
We're coordinating their signature, which is a security technique, through Nunchuk Wallet. And so the court had come. I believe there was a private court ruling raised or something, and the court were going after them, and the Nunchuk wallet developers went back saying, oh, look, it's an open source tool. We don't actually we don't control those keys to the coins, so you're going to have to go to find those individuals, and they could be anywhere on earth. Now, of course, it might be that those individuals are in Canada, but theoretically, they could be on some.
They could be anywhere.
They could be on an island somewhere else.
Correct.
The point being that, as you were saying, in Bitcoin, there's a saying popularized by Andreas Antonopoulos: "It's not your key, not your coins." And so, the saying relates to private key. So to hold Bitcoin is to have knowledge of those private keys. Now, those private keys can be represented by those 12 words, and you can think of it like your wallet is kind of like a keychain. It manages the public addresses that you receive coin into and the private key that's associated to be able to spend from that address. Now, it gets a bit more complicated if you're talking about multi-signature, but the basic idea is that. So
let's not go there.
And we're not going to go into that. Like, we're just going to talk about the basic level, right? So the basic level is that you might purchase on an exchange, and you would then withdraw from that exchange into your self-custody. Now, that might be in your Samurai wallet, as an example, or you could be using, let's say, a cold card, which is a hardware wallet device. Now, disclosure, they are a sponsor of my podcast, but they are my favorite Bitcoin hardware wallet. So you can use them to, for example, hold your coins. Now, there are hardware wallets out there. So there's, for example, there's Bitbox, there's various checks.
Stephan, you're breaking up a little bit. Let me just jump in because for those that don't know, Stephan is in Sri Lanka. And he's doing the best he can with the internet that he's got there. Now, there's been a few questions around sort of what is this? How does this fit? Why are we talking about this? This doesn't work if the electricity gets switched off or the internet gets cut or whatever. Okay, so this is the first of a 5-part series that I'm doing on Plan B. This is specifically the digital Plan B. I'm going to be in a future slow chat. I'm going to be giving you the big picture of Plan B, but I wanted to get Stephan on here as quickly as possible at his first available opportunity to talk about the digital aspects of Plan B, because I think this is something that most people can do quickly, relatively easily. It's more it seems more intimidating than it actually is, and at extremely little cost, if not no cost. So it's the low-hanging fruit of the 5 pillars of Plan B. So I wanted to get stuck into it, give people the tools they needed to at least begin to put their toe in the water and begin to learn about this stuff. I'll give you guys the full context in coming weeks, what we're talking about here, what the other 4 pillars of the 5 pillars of Plan B are. But I wanted to dive in. So, guys, if you're struggling to keep up a little bit, I don't blame you. This took me a very long time to wrap my head around. But trust me, it's one of those rare things where actually doing it is easier than learning about it. It's just once you actually dive in, you just go, okay, I'm going to download the software. I'm going to start going through the steps, and I'm just going to follow the instructions and do what it says. You get to the end of it, and you're like, oh, that actually wasn't so bad. So I downloaded the Samurai wallet. It so happens, the one that Stephan's talking about, onto my phone. And I was a bit apprehensive, and then I simply followed its instructions. I had got my 12 words. I wrote them down on a piece of paper and stuck it away in a secure location. And then all of a sudden, it said, "You're done. You've now got a Bitcoin account, a Bitcoin wallet." I'm sitting there going, "What? That doesn't make sense. No one gave me permission. It didn't have to go off to get checked by somebody. Like, how the hell?" And so just, as an experiment, I had someone send me a tiny little amount of Bitcoin, and sure enough, it showed up in my wallet. I'm like, I've got a bank account. I've got an international currency-less bank account that anyone anywhere in the world can pay me. If I do some work for someone, if I do, I don't know, some editing for somebody online, they send me some files, I do some editing, I send them back the finished product, they pay me in Bitcoin from the other side of the world. There's no bank involved. There's no currency exchange involved. And then I can in turn pay other. It absolutely freaking blew my mind. And that was when I went, okay, I really have to start learning about this, because the power of this in a world where we're watching what's happening in Canada, we're watching what's happening in Venezuela and other places, the power of this to give you options and choices and power over your own destiny, no matter what the government decides to do, is really quite extraordinary. So more context is coming. Trust me, guys, just stick with us here. More context is coming in coming weeks. Stephan, so
let me just add one point to what you were saying, is that it gives you options, right? Because even if
and that's what my Plan B is all about. It's all about having the power of choice no matter what comes your way.
Exactly right. And so the thing you've got to think about is there are people who, I mean, to take even a topical example right now, there are people from Ukraine who are fleeing now. What would you do? Right. And so as an example, even if the internet and the electricity went down, Topher could take those 12 words and his passphrase. So for Samurai Wallet, you have the 12 words and a passphrase. So let's as an example, Topher could literally, he could memorize those 12 words and his passphrase, cross the border with nothing, like literally just the clothes on him and not even a phone. And then on the other side, get a phone, recover it, and then put in his 12 words and the passphrase, and boom, he's got his coins back.
Forget having to smuggle gold in and out. Forget sticking, diamonds in the soles of your shoes and all the stuff that Nazis did to try and get gold out of Germany, or rich people did to try and get their wealth out of Venezuela. All of that's gone. You literally just need 12 words and a passphrase in your head, and your bank account goes with you anywhere in the world. Honestly, it's phenomenal. And to those of you that are sitting there going, oh, this is just part of the New World Order's plan to get control. No, that's the opposite is true. This is the thing that they are most afraid of, the thing that they can control the least out of everything that is out there. This is terrifying to them, because it genuinely, all it takes to survive is a handful of nerds around the world that run these things called nodes. And that's it. If so long as there's a few people out there willing to run these Bitcoin, whatever, is it nodes? Is that the correct terminology?
Yeah, Bitcoin node. Yeah.
Right? For as long as there's a bunch of people, nerds out there willing to run these things, this continues to exist. And the government can't stop it for as long as there's a core group of people out there willing to do that. And it doesn't have to be any specific group. There just has to be, at any given moment in time, a small but dedicated number of people doing that. And this continues to survive and thrive. It's truly phenomenal. It took me a long time to wrap my head around. And for those that want to understand more about how it works, please get onto the Stephan Livera podcast. I want to answer one other question that's coming up quite a lot, and then I'm going to hand back to you, Stephan. A lot of people are saying, oh, but the internet's going to go down, power's going to go down, you should get gold and silver. I will say this. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your eggs in crypto. Don't put all your eggs in Bitcoin. All right. Yes, if you think you should have some precious metals, you should go with your gut. If you think you should have some cash, you do what you think is best for you. But can I really encourage you not to dismiss crypto? And even if you don't have money held in crypto, make sure you understand it and that you can operate in that world should the need ever arise. I'm not saying you should stick your money in there necessarily, although Stephan would argue that maybe you might, maybe it'd be a good idea. I'm not saying that you should. I'm saying you need to understand how it works, because it gives you an option that nothing else that I know of on the face of the planet can give you. It's truly, truly phenomenal. So for the newbie, what do they need to do? You've mentioned this Samurai wallet thing. Talk us through it the same way you did with the VPN. Someone's sitting here watching this. They've never paid attention to crypto before. Now they're like, okay, stuff your Topher. You've piqued my interest. Now I have to do something. What do they do? How hard is it?
Okay, so basically, if you're on Android, you can go to the Google Play Store, search Samurai Wallet, and it's spelled SAMOURAI wallet, and then you click that button. It connects, and then it will tell you basically you can generate a new wallet, and then there you would write down the 12 words and the passphrase. Then you'll be presented with a screen that basically shows your balance. Obviously, it'll be 0 to start, and you can click receive, and then what that will do is that will generate an address. That is your Bitcoin address. You may receive coins into it.
The address is just this random looking string of letters and numbers and stuff. It looks like absolute gobbledygook.
It'll be like BC1, blah, blah, blah. Like, it might be like 30 characters or something. And
copy
basically
and paste it and send it to someone, and they can pay you money. It's like magic.
Yeah, it's really crazy, because the first time you ever do a Bitcoin transaction, you'll just be like mind blown, because basically
I was.
Because I mean, you wouldn't think that just by sharing this string and somebody else could pay to that string of BC1 and the letters and numbers, that's giving you money, but they really are. And so basically you can think of it like your wallet is watching the blockchain for when money hits, money comes in. You can sort of think of it like a decentralized bank in a loose sense, and it's your wallet is watching the blockchain to see that transaction hit and confirm. And once it's come in, now you can out to somebody else. And as an example, you can use website bitrefill.com. And so this is one example where you can go there and you can buy vouchers for all kinds of things, whether it's Woolworths or Coles or other products and services, movies, flights, hotels. Pretty much, you can find that. And so then you can start operating in this more peer-to-peer way. Hypothetically, like you could start taking payment in Bitcoin and buying things directly with Bitcoin. Now, the thing is, you've got that initial starting problem, right? How do you get your first Bitcoin? Now, there's different ways you can do this. If you're interested in privacy, go to a Bitcoin meetup and try to buy some in cash. Just say, hey, you're a Bitcoiner. I've got $100. Can you just sell me $100 of Bitcoin? And you know what? You go to a Bitcoin meetup, the chances are someone will help you with that. Just start it.
100% they will.
You can exchange. there are trade-offs with the exchanges. So, and I work at Swan, which is the above board. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just pause and then start that again.
Sorry,
that's
let me
all right.
start that bit now.
No, you're still breaking up. I'll just fill people in for a second. My experience of Bitcoin people, so long as you can avoid the scammers, which usually they're pretty obvious because, like Stephan said, they're offering you something that's too good to be true. The genuine Bitcoiners want nothing more than to help newbies. If you go to a Bitcoin meetup and you say, listen, guys, this is where I'm at with Bitcoin. Will you help fill me in a little bit further and help me to take the next step? You'll have 10 people jumping all over you, wanting to help you to learn more and understand better. These are enthusiasts, nerds in the truest and best sense of the concept. So my experience is that, if you want to learn more, absolutely find a Bitcoin meetup and go in person and meet some of these people. All right, your internet seems to have stabilized, Stephan.
Okay, we're back. Okay, so there are trade-offs around using what's called KYC exchanges. Now, if you want to buy a large sum of money, let's say you are a high net worth individual and you want to purchase a larger amount of coin because it might not be as easy to do that in a non-KYC trade. So that's why people might come to, let's say for us at swanprivate.com, they want to buy 300 grand, $500,000 worth of Bitcoin. Well, then that's where they come to us and we can help you with those larger amounts of coin. If you're interested in the privacy aspect, then you might use like a meetup as an example, or there are other platforms where you can try to find more like a peer-to-peer trades that don't involve KYC. So there's different, KYC stands for Know Your Customer, as Topher
Know Your Customer, yeah. Banking,
so,
it's a banking requirement for any of these sort of financial services companies, and it applies in the crypto world just as much as it does elsewhere.
Yeah. And so those are some of the things. And then basically as you go down what we call the Bitcoin rabbit hole, you start listening to podcasts. You start
Which
reading.
I'm on my way down right now.
Right. And as you go down this rabbit hole, you learn about Bitcoin nodes, Bitcoin wallets, Bitcoin protocol, Bitcoin economics, Bitcoin mining, privacy, the Lightning Network, you name it. All these different topics and areas. There's cryptography, there's computer science, there's, distributed systems, there's networking. There's all these different topics that it takes for you to really learn and understand what this thing is, because it is just a complicated thing. And so that's
it is
why, people like me and others out there are trying to just act as a guide, right? I'm trying to give you resources, information, interviews with leading people in the Bitcoin world. And the podcast itself is free. It's ad sponsored, right? It's ad model, but you can basically learn for free by listening or finding resources. But it is important that you go to the right people, because if you go to the wrong people, they'll start teaching you about their altcoin, and their altcoin, they might be getting paid to promote that. They might be having a lot of money, getting a lot of money by teaching you to trade, when trading, really 99% of people will lose if they try to trade, because it's a human tendency. Like, you think, oh, look, I can try to trade and, buy low, sell high, and so on. But the reality is most people will lose, because most people are not good traders. We are naturally just momentum traders. The reason you're probably even interested to buy Bitcoin is because you saw the price run up. And then once the price drops, that's when people start thinking, wait a minute, I need to actually go and read and learn, what is this thing that I just bought? And then only then do they actually go down that rabbit hole, the economics, the philosophy, the technology, the security, etc. So those are a few tips I would give for people. But of course, there's so many different areas and topics we could go into. So what do you think would be most helpful for people, Topher?
Well, okay. Can I ask you to step outside your comfort zone a little bit? Because you are a true Bitcoin evangelist. And you refer to the altcoins, and you're not a big fan of them. I want to put aside the speculation, because I wholeheartedly agree. Please don't be speculating on Bitcoin unless you are really going to make this your life, researching it and really genuinely knowing about it. Then maybe, but view it in the same category as there are people that make a living betting on horses, but they make it their life. They know every horse. They know which horses are good on what type of tracks and which riders and blah, blah, blah. They know everything about it. And then they can actually go down to the TAB and make money instead of losing money. There are some people that can do that. You know what percentage it is? 0.00 something. It's a tiny number of people, right? I view Bitcoin the same way. Please don't speculate on cryptocurrency. Sorry, not Bitcoin, but cryptocurrency in general. However, I want to put to you a hypothesis that I have. If you're viewing cryptocurrency as a hedge, both a financial hedge in the case of the loss of value in fiat currencies, the inflation of fiat currencies, but also a hedge against being unbanked, a situation that some people in Canada are facing. My hypothesis is this, and it may not sit comfortably with you, but I'd like to get your feedback, good, bad, or indifferent. I want your honest opinion on this. My position would be, if I was trying to hold value in any crypto, it would be in Bitcoin. However, I would view that as like a deep savings account, a long-term savings account. And I would also have probably an Ethereum or a Ripple wallet, one or the other, which I would view as my transaction account, into which I would move a couple of $100 from Bitcoin in a single transaction across to that. Simply because some of these other currencies, it's my understanding, have a much better capacity to handle buying a coffee, really small daily transactions. If I was looking to actually use cryptocurrency in a daily, very small transaction type of context, there are other altcoins that maybe don't have the inherent value that Bitcoin have. I'm actually on the same page as you on that.
Sorry, 1 second. I just got,
Yep.
I'll be back.
Yeah,
30 seconds.
Right. Yeah, cool.
But
second. Their utility, is much greater. So I'll go into that for a second while Stephan's doing that. Bitcoin is sort of the original. It was the very first one. And the way it was designed was incredibly clever and incredibly revolutionary. But there are certain limitations about the number of transactions that it can do in a given period of time.
Sorry, Topher, go on.
Right. So I was just introducing people that don't know to the fact that the way that Bitcoin is designed, there is kind of a limit on the number of transactions that it can do over a given period of time. There can be delays. When you try and do a Bitcoin transaction, it might be 20 minutes. If you're unlucky, it might be an hour before that transaction actually clears and goes through. When you want to buy a coffee, that's not really ideal. When you're trying to buy groceries, it's not really ideal. So there are other currencies that have done a better job of solving that problem, but I would be on the same page as you and say they're not an authentic store of value in the same way that Bitcoin is. If I was trying to become, go for it. No, okay, go for it. That's my question. Go for it.
Sure. So the short answer is you can use other technologies in the Bitcoin world to transact quickly. So one example that I use and I talk about a lot is called the Lightning Network. Now,
which Kirk just commented on here. Yep, and Stephen.
So there are Lightning Network wallets. So as an example, Moon Wallet is one. Breeze, so that's BREEZ.technology. Another one is called Phoenix Wallet. I like Phoenix, actually. It's a pretty good one. Again, you can find Phoenix Wallet on the iPhone or Apple, the Android app stores or Play Store.
Yep.
And basically, these will really automate that process of taking part in the Lightning Network for a beginner or a newbie. There is also Wallet of Satoshi, which is an Australian Lightning Network wallet.
Right.
So this actually can transact extremely cheaply and instantly. So this is what you would use for low value day-to-day things. And so as an example, if you were paying someone $10, I'd do that over the Lightning Network. If I was paying someone $1,000 or $2,000, then I would
Bitcoin.
Then I would use on-chain Bitcoin. And to be clear, it is still Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. It's
you're quite right.
Using an on-chain transaction for the larger amounts versus using the Lightning Network for the smaller amount transactions.
If anyone wants to go deep down that rabbit hole, please follow Stephan Livera and listen to his podcast. He does a brilliant job of explaining it, but it's one of those things that takes time to wrap your head around, and we're not going to go deep into now. Yep. Just know that it exists. I had actually forgotten about the Lightning Network, so I'm glad that you brought that back up. There are some limitations as I understand it, but I'll look into some of those wallets that you've mentioned that automate some of those limitations, because I need it to be simple. I'm not a tech person at all. And so I need it to be simple. I need it to be as easy as pulling out my bank card and going tap on the pay terminal. That's what I need it to be like. And so I'll have a bit of a look at that. Now, there are people who are concerned about the future of, and let's talk about Bitcoin specifically. That is your main area. That's your main focus. Yeah. And it's also the one that a lot of people are really skeptical about. And there's this view that as soon as the last Bitcoin gets mined, because there are a finite number of Bitcoins, they will run out one day. And there are people who are of the view that as soon as that happens, the Bitcoin project is over. Bitcoin no longer has any value. At that point, you won't be able to transact it because there's no more mining, and the transactions depend on the mining happening. And all of a sudden, show's over. Everyone's lost all of their money. How do you respond to that?
Sure. So the short answer is Bitcoin mining will continue. So think of it this way. So as we speak today, a little bit under 19 million Bitcoins have been issued out into existence. Those last coins, so 21 million is the limit. It's actually just a bit under that. So call it, 2 million coins, a little bit over 2 million coins that are yet to be issued over the next 120 or so, roughly. That's kind of how it's going.
Yeah.
Oh, have you lost me?
Yeah, briefly, but we got that last comment.
Okay, gotcha. So when you look at the Bitcoin network, it's actually sustained through two main pieces. So in terms of the Bitcoin mining, it's sustained in two main ways. One is called the block subsidy. These are the new coins that are yet to be issued. And secondly, transaction fees. So when you transact with your Samurai wallet, you're paying what's called a miner fee. That fee goes to the miners, and that helps sustain them. So really what we're talking about here is that the network is going to transition over from the block subsidy forming most of that block reward versus the transaction fees paying for the security of the network. And so that's basically the short answer.
Let me put this into layman's terms. The work behind Bitcoin, the processing of transaction is done by these people doing this thing called mining, which I'm not going to go deep into, but there's this thing called mining. There are people that choose to do it because every time they successfully mine the next block, again, that's terminology that I'm not going to explain, but when they do the next step in the blockchain, or on the blockchain, they get rewarded by being paid the fees that people agreed to pay as a reward for people processing their transaction. And at the moment, they are rewarded in new Bitcoins that didn't exist previously, but that the algorithm generates and it's built into it. Now, there's a finite number of coins built into it as well. Now, someone asked, how is it finite? And this is one of the questions that I had. And when I understood the answer to this question, that was a bit of a breakthrough for me, understanding the whole project. So this might be worth spending a minute on.
Yeah, sure. So
how come people couldn't just say, oh, well, we'll just keep mining more? What stops that from happening?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So basically, when you run a Bitcoin node, it is like a fake Bitcoin detector. It's like, but the interesting part is it's not just like a gold, like those devices that can check whether it's fake gold. It's your Bitcoin node is checking all the rules of the entire network. Every coin that's ever existed in the Bitcoin network, you're checking that entire
every single one of them.
Transaction history. And so the nodes are what protect the network. Now, in order to be a miner, you have to connect to a Bitcoin node. And the problem is, like, imagine, let's say a few miners think, oh, hey, let's change it to 30 million coins. Let's be sneaky and just keep mining more. Yeah. What would happen is they would fork off the network because the rest of the people would say, no, hold on. I chose the 21 million limit Bitcoin, not 30 million coin limit. And so basically they would just create a minority fork and it would just become irrelevant. And so that's the short answer.
Let me put that into layman's terms. The system is not centralized on the decisions of any one individual. You've got a whole bunch of nodes, which are basically computers that are all running the same code. And if a minority of nodes change the code, they get rejected by the rest of the nodes. Is that a fairly simple way to put it? Right?
Think of it like, in order to change Bitcoin, you would need this massive super majority, and something like that, the 21 million limit, basically seen as sacrosanct. It's not changing because don't forget what would be required. It would be required for all the current existing holders to just be okay with diluting their holding.
To agree. That's right. So it's almost like a democratic process. You would need a majority of existing Bitcoin holders to agree to just suddenly go from 21 million limit to, say, 30 million limit. And in the process, this is what you got to understand. In the process, they're agreeing to devalue the coins that they hold. So for good economic, selfish reasons, they're not going to agree to that.
So what you might say then is that it's not even really a democratic system in that way. I mean, sort of loosely, but it's also more like crypto anarchy, right? It might be more just like people just, they run the code that they believe in and the code with the 21 million limit. And because the overwhelming, everyone in the network, they believe with that. And on average 10 minutes, there's a new block found and the network has to find consensus again. And so that is how this network stays in consensus. And so the people who think that somehow you're just going to go and change that and turn all the, get enough of the miners on board, enough of the nodes on board, and the holders of Bitcoin who are just going to sit by and idly let that happen. Well, no, because, and here's the other thing, you're running this node, it's already checking those rules. It's checking the 21 million. There's called a block subsidy or block reward, block subsidy function. And they're running the code that implies a limit of just under 21 million coins. If they see a block come from somebody else, let's say a hostile miner or a hostile node, they just don't see that as it's like they don't even see that as reality.
It's just rejected. It's just rejected out of hand. Yeah. So Natasha makes a great comment. To be honest, I still get a bit lost with how it all works, but this has made me think more positively about Bitcoin. Thanks so much to Topher and Stephan for providing more data. Natasha, I understand exactly how you feel because I wrestled with this for a very, very long time. And I know I keep saying it, but seriously, watch a whole bunch of Stephan Livera's podcasts. he talks to different people, and each one on its own doesn't answer the whole puzzle. But as you dive in and start listening to more and you get the pieces and you start to put them into place, you're going to have these aha moments, which is what I had along the way. And look, I had to hear the same things said multiple times, multiple different ways by multiple different people before they began to sink in, because this is truly the opposite of everything that we're used to. It is truly a bottom-up financial system. And it took me a very long time to, one, understand what that meant, and to, two, accept that it was actually viable and that it worked. It just flew in the face of everything that I thought I know. So I'm aware we've only got about another sort of 15 minutes or so before you're going to have to head off there.
I've got about
Stephan.
20, 25. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So what are the downsides of operating in Bitcoin? You mentioned earlier, for example, $10, you do it on the Lightning Network. A couple of $1,000, you do it in Bitcoin.
On-chain,
What are some of the limitations? Let's be realistic here. What are some of the limitations of Bitcoin as it exists today, and what's being done about it?
So there's a few things there. One thing is around making it accessible to run a Bitcoin node, because it's seen like Bitcoin is decentralized validation. And so what ideally, sorry, have we cut out again?
No, you're good.
Okay. So it's seen like Bitcoin is decentralized validation. Text the system is that people are checking the rules. And that's why part of the educator community, Bitcoin educator community, is out there trying to teach people about how to self-custody and then how to run their own Bitcoin node. And it's a journey. I'm not expecting people to go zero to hero, right? You start where you start, and then you slowly learn and you take it.
I am not ready to run a node yet. I am a long way from being ready to run a node.
I promise it's easier than you think, but we'll cover that another day.
It probably is.
Yeah. But the limitations, as it were, are certainly there in terms of trade-offs that are required for the system to operate. So part of the trade-off of the way Bitcoin is designed, it's that not every transaction can happen on-chain, right? Because of that, because they wanted to keep it accessible, because we as a community wanted to keep it accessible for people to run a Bitcoin node. And that means a retail individual, the everyday, every man, every woman, to be able to afford the part purchase and Bitcoin node, the hard drive space, internet that would provide for that, but to raise the size and let lots of transactions all happen on chain and not use like the Lightning Network, it would lower the possibility of, might drive centralization in the system. Now, some of the other things that might happen, I mean, potentially if the system got captured, as an example, like, so historically gold used to be the money of the world, but then what happened is all the gold, or a lot of the world's gold, was held in Fort Knox, and then the system got captured by the government. And so I think Bitcoin's success in some sense depends on its ability to resist that kind of capture. Now, I believe I'm confident on that. I believe it will, because it just fundamentally allows anybody to spin up a Bitcoin node or spin up a Bitcoin wallet on your phone, and you can now take payment, receive, spend coins, etc. So I think that is just fundamentally too difficult to be stopped at a global level. How do you stop all these people from just running this software on their laptop or on their phone? It's just next to impossible. So I think part of the focus is around education and building out businesses in this Bitcoin world. So there are Bitcoin businesses who are offering things like Bitcoin financial services or Bitcoin security service, or tools that help you improve your Bitcoin privacy or preserve your Bitcoin privacy. So Samurai Wallet is probably an example there on the privacy side. There is also protocol development and review and research that's required to help scale. So as an example, there are people talking about different ways of making it scalable and accessible for people to use Bitcoin while still having some level of sovereignty. Now, depending on where that trade you are, there'll be some people who are literally not even holding any coins. So they're just holding like a ticker on an exchange somewhere that kind of represents Bitcoin. And then maybe you've got some coin that's on an exchange somewhere. So it's custodial. It's not, non-custodial. And then on the other end of the scale is people who are fully non-custodial, learning to run their own Bitcoin node, really being a sovereign, financially self-sovereign member of the network, if you will. So these are some of the considerations out there. Over time, there's research being done on privacy. How do you try to make it more private for people, or how do you use it in a more private way? So, I mean, there's all these different topics, and also even just kind of the government response, because, of course, there are people who, let's say, believe in, let's say, the ESG, environmental social government, they believe in, let's say, the whole renewables narrative, and they try to attack Bitcoin's proof of work system and say, look, you're using all this energy. Why don't we use this other coin? Doesn't have proof of work. But the difference being Bitcoin is secure. Bitcoin proof of work is actually what makes it secure and distributed. Whereas, let's say, some proof of stake system is kind of like what I was saying before. It's just creating the fiat system just for new owners. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things that I think is worth pointing out is how new this technology is, and in a real sense, how immature this technology is. It's what made me apprehensive as I started to put my toe in the water and get a wallet and that sort of thing was I can remember the early days of Bitcoin and blockchain and when it came out, and you almost needed to be a programmer just to kind of use it. You really needed to have some technical knowledge just to kind of get into that world. A huge amount of work has been done by people to make it user-friendly so that mugs like me can download a piece of software, follow some simple instructions, and oh, bang, I'm a Bitcoiner now. Oh, wow, that was easier than I thought. That same work is being done into nodes to try and make it easier, like you said, for people to run nodes and make that barrier, the technological barrier to entry, lower and lower and lower and easier and easier and easier. And I'll go back to what I saw in 2014. This is 8 years ago now. The uptake of Bitcoin in Venezuela was very high, despite the fact that it was comparatively difficult to use back then. Why? Because they were highly motivated. They had a collapsing economy on their hands. I didn't expect to be having this conversation now. 2 years ago, I thought we were 10 years to 12 to 15 years away from a financial collapse. Now I'm a little more concerned. I think it might be a little bit closer than what I thought it was back then, which is why I've advanced my knowledge and why I'm encouraging other people to start to think about and start to advance your knowledge. But understand, this is a relatively immature technology in terms of the user experience, in terms of the ecosystem around it. There are all sorts of things that are yet to happen and some things that are just emerging now. You can now borrow in Bitcoin. There are places that will lend Bitcoins to you. Whether that's a good or a bad idea is another thing. But now financial services in Bitcoin is starting to become a thing. You can now hedge in Bitcoin. You can get call options and put options and derivatives against Bitcoin versus other currencies and so forth. And slowly this ecosystem is going to mature. I want to finish with the latest kind of innovation in the blockchain world. And this is almost kind of for shits and giggles, almost a little bit just for fun, because I have no idea what you're going to say, because I haven't heard you I haven't listened to any of your most recent podcasts. I'm actually working through your back catalog because your early stuff is where you covered more of the basics, and that's what I need, right? So I'm way back in like years ago episodes. So I don't know, maybe you have addressed this, but the hot button topic right now is this thing called an NFT. And everyone throws it into the same basket as, there's cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and NFTs and and they lump it all in like it's this one thing together. What are your thoughts? What the hell is an NFT? Does it have any practical function? Because at the moment, people are buying and selling pictures of monkeys for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it makes no freaking sense. Help me to understand.
So I view NFTs as essentially orthogonal to Bitcoin. Like they're just, people might say loosely, cryptography is involved, but there are a lot of hacks and problems in the broader crypto, that's inverted commas, crypto. Whereas in Bitcoin, the focus is really, as in, if you look at the hardcore Bitcoin community, like the focus really is about security, privacy, and all, like, defending your value and self-sovereignty and things. Whereas if you look out into the broader crypto world, it's kind of more gambly and a little more speculative in ways.
Yeah.
There's a lot more leverage applying. And look, in the case of NFTs, let me try to present kind of the good case and the bad case, right? The steelman, the steelman NFTs is something like, you can think of it like a patronage model, right? Let's say you liked artist or this singer, this musician, and you want to support them. And so it's kind of like crypto Patreon-ish, let's say, loosely considered, right? I would say that's the steelman NFTs.
Okay.
Probably the bad case for NFTs would be something like, look, there's probably a tax evasion, whatever.
Bit of money laundering going on.
Yeah, like a money laundering sort of thing. I mean, that said, it depends on you think about that. For me personally, I've never done any of that stuff. I don't do any NFT stuff myself. I view it as just an orthogonal thing, whereas I view Bitcoin as a project about creating sound for the world, scarcely limited, but open as a system.
Yeah.
Or I might have dropped here. Can you hear me? Yeah.
So I can hear you.
I view this open project to really make the world a better place. And I believe it is there's lots of technology we need to make the world a better place, freedom technology. But I believe Bitcoin number one, most important freedom technology in our lives. I really believe that. There's all these other technologies that will help, but Bitcoin is the one thing that will change the relationship between governments and individuals and corporations in a way that bring power back towards the individuals. And expect that to play out over the long term. It happen tomorrow. It might be 10, 20, 30 years, but it's important to get your head around it now so that you can grapple better with this. And of course, like you said, it is extremely early days. In the day, there's 8 billion people. How many will hold some Bitcoin? Probably talking probably something like 200 or 300, something in that is my guess. So we are still extremely early of the adoption cycle of Bitcoin. And the other thing is that 200 million people, they might just be only holding a tiny bit or just kind of really dipping their toe in it. Whereas let's say that smaller group of people who really have conviction and believe in this thing for the long-term things, they are holding their own Bitcoin keys in their wallet, they're running a Bitcoin node, that group is so much smaller. We're talking maybe 100 or 2,000 people, something like that. It's
All right, so NFTs are going to be a topic for another time. It's something I'm looking into. I'll debrief once we're sort of finished with Stephan and he has to go. I'll debrief a little bit. I'll talk a bit about the 5 pillars of Plan B and a little bit about sort of where this sits in the bigger scheme of things. But very, very briefly, the thing with blockchain, which is the technology that Bitcoin is built on and all these other currencies are built on and NFTs are built on, is essentially what it is it's a piece of code that proves that you own something. And it's done in such a way, and this took me a while to wrap my mind around, it's done in such a way that someone else can't just grab the same piece of code and go, oh, well, no, I'm the owner, right? If I have a title to a house, someone could forge the title to the house, right? But imagine if every other house had a record of every house ownership. Someone can forge my certificate of title to my house, but as soon as they try and present it, the other people are going to go back to their records and say, well, hang on, that doesn't match my records. And so it's this distributed ledger is the key phrase that I think it took me a while to get my head around, that everyone knows what every Bitcoin account or Bitcoin wallet has in it. And if someone comes along and lies, they get called out straight away because there's all these nodes out there that have a record of exactly who owns what. NFTs are just another way. It's not a tradable currency in the same way, but it's just a way of saying, I own this thing. And at the moment, it's just being used for some digital artwork. That's all it's being really used for. But in time, I think we will see house titles, car titles, banking, I think is going to start to move towards a blockchain type of format where they actually secure the ownership of who owns what through this particular technology. So I agree. I think there's a massive future in the technology. Is there a huge future in the currencies themselves? Well, that's a topic for open debate. I'm being persuaded by you, Stephan, that Bitcoin does have a very bright future ahead of it and that some of these other coins do not. All I can say with confidence is that blockchain as a technology, like you said, is going to change our world in ways that we can't imagine. And it's going to allow us to do things from the ground up rather than from the top down. Before we finish, Stephan, how do people find you? You are sponsored by a few different groups. Please tell us who they are, because I trust you and I trust the people that you recommend. And for those that don't want to have to go and do their own research, give them the shortcut. Yes, you're going to make whatever your tiny little cut is out of it, whatever, fine. But if someone doesn't want to have to do the work and the research and figure out who's for real and who's trying to scam them, who can they trust? Tell us about who you work with.
Sure. So I work with, so basically the main way people find me is stephanlivera.com. In search in your podcast app, search Stephan Livera podcast, and you'll see me hundreds of interviews with people in the Bitcoin world. I've interviewed people like Jack Dorsey, Michael Saylor, and all kinds of other people who are in the Bitcoin world. I also write for different publications, and I've done guides and curation and things like that you can find. Might have just cut out there. Have you got me?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay, yeah, sometimes it's cutting. So I would say that's the main place to find me, and obviously Twitter and me on Twitter. So Stephan Livera. That's the main thing that you can find where you'll see me talk about different products and different aspects or different Bitcoin software as well. So talking about this, that, and the other. Now, but it's just seen like just an open source community. Like I don't even have necessarily a relationship there or some kind of ad relationship there. My podcast has sponsors, but that's one thing. And the aspect. So I also work at Swan Bitcoin. So Swan Bitcoin is a place where you can buy Bitcoin and let Bitcoin. So particularly if you're in the US, you can set up easily and buy a smaller amount. Now, if you're international, you might it works currently better for those of you out there who are high net worth individuals looking to purchase larger amounts or if you're with a business, then it makes sense for you to come to us at swanprivate.com. And so what we do at Swan Private is basically you might be in a situation where you're trying to set up your or purchase a large amount of coin and you're going to some of the big exchanges out there and you're not getting customers, you're not getting support, you're getting stuck in a ticket, customer ticket hell, customers of ticket hell. What we provide, we built this service to provide a one-on-one guided call and guided, someone you can call and you can email. So for those individuals, swanprivate.com is the place to go. And basically that will get you set up so that you can purchase larger amount of coin and also get some guidance on things like, if I'm lending or other things, you can talk to your Swan Private provider there. So those are the main things, but I would just say it's worth your while to just get started. And if you need to just buy a small amount, if it's $50 a Bitcoin, whatever, just buy a small amount, get it on your wallet, start that process of learning. That's listening, reading, all kinds of resources. And in fact, I might even just leave, there's one other free we make available at Swan Bitcoin. I mean, there's a bunch, but what I'll leave you with is swanbitcoin.com/freebook. So basically, just put your email, you'll get this book for called Inventing Bitcoin. And it's a nice short kind of 1.5 hours or 2 hours worth of reading. And it's a beginner level explanation of Bitcoin. It's an explanation for non-technical people. So I think it's a great resource. It's something that we do for free at Swan Bitcoin. So that site is swanbitcoin.com/freebook. So if you go there, you can put in your email, you get this book for free. And we take Bitcoin education seriously at Swan. So that's some stuff we do. But just wanted to say thanks very much for inviting me on, Topher. It was great to...
Stephan, thank you. You're a man in demand. You know your stuff, and you could be talking to anyone right now, and you've chosen to talk to us. So I'm very, very grateful. My own education, such as it is, I'm still a noob, has come largely from you and others, but a lot of it has come from you, and I found you to be one of the most reliable and just straight up and down, no nonsense. You're not trying to sell me on stuff. You're just telling me how it works and helping me to understand it better. So I really appreciate it. To everyone watching, please make sure you do check out the Stephan Livera podcast. And mate, I know you've got another booking. I'll give you some time to get across to that and have a drink and whatever else you got to do before that. But thank you so much for being with us today. And we will talk again soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Cheers, mate. Alrighty, so I'm just going to debrief a little bit here because this, for some people, this has kind of come out of the blue. What the hell is this digital plan B? What are we really actually talking about here? A lot of people expressing concern about what happens if the internet disappears, what happens if they cut the power, these sorts of things. Plan B is about options, and I have talked about Plan B in previous slow chats. I'm not going to completely recap that, but I want to give some context to what we're talking about right now. Plan B for me is about options, and there are 5 key pillars that I think we all need to be thinking about our lives and thinking about our options in. And tonight was about the digital Plan B. So if you recall at the start, we talked about VPNs, virtual private networks, that allows you to be able to get data that your local internet providers and the people that know who you are don't necessarily know what data you're getting, who you're talking to, etc. And then at the other end, the people sending you the data don't necessarily know who you are. So if you wanted to access, information that is practically illegal right now, like stuff about ivermectin, for example, I'm not talking about like properly illegal stuff. You shouldn't be doing that. But I'm talking about the stuff that has been ridiculously deemed illegal. If you wanted to access that, a VPN is going to add a certain layer of privacy to you. Tor, the Onion Router network. Now, the Brave browser is the easiest way to do that. Download the Brave browser, start using that, start exploring the world of kind of the so-called dark web. It's not what it sounds like. It sounds like it's a back alleyway where people are getting stabbed and murdered all the time. It's not. It's a place where people can speak freely, where information is abundant. Not all of it is accurate. buyer beware. But let's be honest, you turn on on CNN, you turn on the ABC, not all of the information is accurate. Buyer beware. It's the same deal, right? You've still got to be an adult. You've still got to assess what you're seeing. If something sounds too good to be true, as Stephan said, it probably is. And one of the dangers when you're new to this space is people can pull the wool over your eyes really easily. So I would really suggest you tiptoe your way into this world. Go slowly, learn how to walk before you try to run. So this is about the digital plan B, making sure that you can communicate with people, even if maybe the government might not want you to, or if you wanted to talk about things that maybe the government might not want you to talk about. Have the option to be able to continue to communicate with the world, even if we had something like a Chinese-style digital Iron Curtain, and to be able to talk about things that maybe the government doesn't want you talking about. So we covered those in the very start, very briefly, because actually, if you dive in, both of them are a lot easier. The Onion Router, install the Brave browser, give it a go. But also VPNs are actually really easy. And I was a bit apprehensive when I started to get myself set up, and I shouldn't have been apprehensive. It is actually really, really easy to do. I personally use ExpressVPN at the moment. That's not an endorsement. That's just for those of you that want to shortcut the research side of things. I found them to be very good. You do pay a monthly subscription, so it costs you money. You sign up with a credit card, so you're not anonymous. Be aware of all of that. But it is a layer of protection on your data and on what you're doing. Then we got into Bitcoin, and the point of this is the second half of the digital plan B. So now you've got the ability to communicate. What about the ability to do business? What if you donated to a cause like the Canadian truckers, and all of a sudden the government was using that as an excuse, as a pretext to shut down your bank accounts, to take away your ability to transact? What would you do? What options would you have? Well, in the modern world, we can have options. And in my opinion, cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin in particular, gives you that option, gives you the ability to be able to transact with people without the permission of anyone else. You just, if they want to pay you and you want to receive their money, or actually if they want to pay you and they have your address, they can pay you. If you want to pay somebody and you have their address, you can pay them. And there's no one that can tell you that you can't. There's no one that can stop you. So having that, I'm not saying you're going to need them every day, and I'm not saying you're going to need them tomorrow, but start the learning process now, because like Stephan said, and I've been saying, there's a learning curve here. There is some time. You got to dip your toe in the water, and the concepts. For me, it wasn't the practical use; it was the concepts and actually accepting that this is even possible. Start that process now. So me personally, I'm on Android, so I use Samurai as a wallet on my phone. I don't know what you would use if you're an iPhone user, but again, just Google the best 5 iPhone Bitcoin wallets and have a read of the descriptions of them and which ones are better at certain things and better at other things, and just pick one. Pick one, set up a Bitcoin wallet, and actually just start to have a play. If you want to deposit money into it, you're going to need an exchange to do that. If you do business online, or you have people that might pay you for your work in Bitcoin, you can get money into your wallet that way as well. And then you can just start to actually start this learning process. Because if the situation comes up in 2 years' time where you desperately need another way of paying, making and receiving payments, and you start your learning then, that's going to suck. But if you start your learning now and that day comes, you're going to know what to do, and you're going to know how to pivot. You're going to have options, which is the catchphrase of all of my Plan B stuff. So there's 5 pillars of Plan B. There's the digital. That's what we've been discussing today. There's the financial. Then there is Glenn McBride makes a good point. When you hear Google, I recommend using DuckDuckGo. That's a very good point. So use DuckDuckGo as your search engine and search for the best 5 iPhone Bitcoin wallets and go from there. So there is the digital, which is what we're discussing. There's the financial aspects of Plan B, financial options, not being locked into one place geographically because of how you earn your money or where your money is. Then there is the logistical aspects of Plan B. So this is where things like second passports, residencies in other countries, etc., start to come in. A key part of Plan B is having the option to not stay in the country that you're in. It's all about options. The biggest option is the option to go, you know what, I don't like the way Australia is going right now. I'll go and spend a couple of years in another country where I am happy with where they're at, and I'll just keep an eye on Australia. So the logistical aspects of it, but that also includes not just the ability to move around other countries, but also the logistics of having some resilience in where you are. And I talked about that in detail in a previous slow chat, a 30-day survival plan so that you can survive in place. You've got everything you need: food, water, sanitation, and energy to then heat and cook, to heat water and cook food, etc., all that stuff. Then there is the community aspect of plan B. And if the world goes the way some people are concerned that it may be going, a community is going to be one of the most important things that you can possibly have. But a community is a two-way street, and you need to be thinking about what you bring to the community just as much as you're thinking about the community and what they can offer to you. That's another pillar of the plan B. And then health, because your physical health is going to be one of the biggest limiting factors in your flexibility and your options should you decide that you needed to go somewhere else or do something else for whatever reason. And, you know, if there was a massive solar flare that took out the internet and took out power and all of a sudden we're all left on our own, you know, we're not all going to be killed by zombies. We're going to be killed by infections because we scraped our leg and we couldn't get antibiotics, or by diarrhea because we drank bad water. Like, it's the basic sanitation, and that speaks directly to health then. And if you've got ongoing health issues, thinking about how that plays in with your plan B and keeping your options open. You don't want your health to take your options away if at all possible. So those are the 5 pillars of plan B. Today, we've just scraped the surface of the digital plan B. We're going to touch on this again in the future, but I'm going to go through and touch on each of the 5 pillars and then come back and start revisiting them and going a little bit deeper as well. Now, Kirk makes a good point. Nomad capitalist Andrew Henderson, I've talked about him before. Really good resource. Now, he aims at high net worth individuals. So if you wanted to work with him, you'd need to be worth a couple of $1 million. I'm not. And I'm guessing, you know, many of you, probably some of you are, but many of you aren't. But his information is fantastic and he gives it away for free. He does heaps of videos, there's heaps of blog posts and so forth. Go and spend some time on the Nomad Capitalist website, nomadcapitalist.com. Another great resource for learning, just stretching your brain and learning more about this stuff. This is stuff that I expected to be relevant in another 10 years, and time has moved faster than what I expected it was going to do. And it's this is stuff that we need to be thinking about, unfortunately. I don't say that with any pleasure whatsoever, but this is stuff that we need to be beginning to think about as we move into an increasingly uncertain future. As the world becomes more uncertain, we need to be working hard to make sure that our options stay very, very open. And that's what my plan B is all about. So that's it for today. That's a summary on what's coming up with the plan B. We've covered the digital plan B today with Stephan Livera. Look him up. A wealth of knowledge on all things Bitcoin, especially, but also digitally more generally. And I highly recommend you spend some time digging through his podcast. There's literally hundreds of them, but also, as was mentioned by Kirk, Nomad Capitalist Andrew Henderson. Spend some time there as well. Just begin to stretch your brain. Start to think about things that maybe you haven't thought about before. And I think fast forward another couple of years, you're going to be kind of glad that you started this journey now, rather than waiting until you need that information and then be scrambling around trying to find it. So I hope you enjoyed the slow chat today. It was a short, slow chat. Unfortunately, Stephan had other commitments. He is a man in demand. He gave us an hour and 45 minutes of his time, and I'm very, very grateful that he did that. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've got a lot out of it. That's it from me. I'm continuing my travels. I'm in Griffith right now. We're continuing to head north up through Dubbo and ultimately into Brisbane, and then coming down via the coast. Just taking a bit of a break, getting out of Victoria for a month and just sort of clearing the head a little bit. But I will be trying to make sure the slow chats continue, and we'll be trying to maintain activity on the Facebook page and so forth. And there'll be a couple of YouTube videos coming out while I'm away as well. So it should be pretty much business as usual, but I hope you've enjoyed tonight, and I will definitely be speaking to you again very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining.